Hi, it is July 12th, 2022, and this is the last day of the dead period that I had predicted for these financial markets a few weeks ago. I said I didn't think there was going to be a lot of action until the next CPI number came out. Well, that number is due to come out tomorrow at 8:30 Eastern Time AM, which is 5:30 here. Which means I might wake up early just to kind of see the market reaction to that number, because I'm expecting that number to be higher than expectations. And if it is higher, especially if it's significantly higher, this is gonna, it should have a shock on them, give the markets a big shock, because they think right now that the Fed's raising rates, that they're getting inflation under control, and thus people are buying the dollar and selling the precious metals. So there's this story of dollar strength going around. But if you find out that the dollar's purchasing power is decreasing faster than expected when it was at a scary high level last month, well, is that what you want to be holding? And I think the answer is no. So I think we're going to see a reversal in that dollar trade and in the precious metals. But beyond that, the markets as a whole are pretty much based on what the outlook for the Fed is. So if the inflation number comes in high, the market's going to think, oh, wow, the Fed's going to need to do even more to fight inflation. And they're going to anticipate higher rates, which is going to put more downward pressure on the equity market and on the bond market, because they're going to think, oh, quantitative tightening is going to continue. And people are going to get out of their bonds. So we legitimately could see the end game of this financial system play out tomorrow morning, depending on what this number is and how big the market reaction is, because where do you hide if you don't feel like the Fed's going to protect the bond market? The bond market is going to undergo a double whammy, because it's A, the Fed isn't going to come in and save it, and B, if inflation's high, those long-term rates, investors are going to demand more yield to keep up with inflation. So the bond market is going to take a double whammy. The stock market is really a corollary of that. So the stock market is going to get destroyed. Leverage trades, Bitcoin, etc., I expect to get destroyed. And the question is, will precious metals get destroyed with those things, or will those factors be enough to create a net bid for precious metals, even though there's a general liquidation going on? And I feel as though that's the case, because, you know, the amount of people who trade the gold market is relatively small compared to the amount of people who are going to be panicking, seeing their bond market and stock market portfolios collapsing, and looking for a safe haven. And so even if some people are liquidating gold to cover other losses, other margin calls, etc., that are happening, I think that selling is going to be less than the people that are buying. And I think, you know, people who are selling in that way are usually selling gold contracts, futures contracts, etc. They're not selling physical gold and physical silver. They are making paper trades. So I think one thing you could see is a lot of the physical, the demand that side's coming in is going to be demanding physical, while the people who are selling are trying to sell futures contracts, etc. And so you could end up saying this divergence in the physical price where that breaks away ahead of the spot price. So like these are things that literally could all happen tomorrow. I mean, I'm not talking about some future, some dystopian day. I'm literally talking about tomorrow morning. This could all happen. And from my perspective, it's actually hard to see how it won't, because it's hard to see how that CPI number is going to come in and isn't going to be higher than the month before, which I haven't even looked at what the expectations are, but I'm sure they expect it to be lower because they think the Fed's fighting it, and they just don't understand the Fed is so far behind the ball that they can't fight it, that it's going to die regardless, that this whole system's going to collapse regardless, and that you want to own fucking physical precious metals regardless. So that, I think, is the big story right now. You know, I had mentioned this group that went to Washington. So that group's leader, he was released. So some of that calmed down a bit. Now, there's been other stuff going on that's been getting some people riled up, but right now it's a small movement. However, even though it's a small movement, it's a reminder of the power of the people. And I mean, if you remember January 6th, I don't know, I know that this whole thing was, there's been a lot of discussion about, oh, we're going to go after these people, etc., etc. But the actual day that this thing happened, if you remember how easy it was for these people to get into the Capitol and to basically get the Congress hiding in this room, fearing for their lives. And I mean, it was a very small amount of the people who breached the Capitol. I mean, if you look at Sri Lanka right now, and the fact that the government basically completely had to flee the country, that they were just overwhelmed by the population, that can happen really fast, really quick. And if you get even a fraction of a percent of the population out in Washington, that could happen. And the government would just be no more. And now it's like, okay, you got rid of the government, you got rid of the bad guys, right? But here's the situation. You got a currency that's collapsed, a financial system that's collapsed, a population without job skills, without savings, without the ability to feed themselves for longer than about a week or two. So what you got is you've actually got a real emergency situation here. And even if the government isn't going to be resolving this situation, it still needs to be resolved. Otherwise, you're just going to have millions of armed and starving people roaming the streets, killing whatever they can for food. And that's not a world I want to live in. And it's not a world I imagine many people will survive in for long. So, in my book, I propose solutions that we can apply in the wake of this financial collapse. And I present a path forward for our country here in America. Ultimately, a path that I believe that the world can follow and can gain inspiration from, but one that requires us to focus on our domestic issues, which will be severe, and navigating the transition to a free society. You know, I don't have all the answers. My book is just a beginning in a conversation that needs to happen between a lot of people. but it's getting the ball rolling. It's throwing out some ideas. It's addressing some of those immediate concerns we're going to have, as well as some of our intermediate and some of our longer term concerns. So, this book is something that I have to offer as a gift. It's not about me. It's not about who came up with these answers. It's about doing what can be done to try to prevent the death of the vast majority of this society. So, stay tuned. We'll see how tomorrow goes.